Hi, everyone, and welcome to the PISA for You Network webinar. With us tonight, we have Manuela and Michael. They are here from the United States. Manuela is a teacher of mathematics, and Michael is a science teacher. I will let them introduce themselves a little bit more, as they know themselves more than I know them. We'll begin with you, Manuela. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
My name is Manuela Prajea. I'm originally from Romania, and now I'm teaching in the United States to the program, International Exchange Program for teachers to participate. And I can tell you about me that I have a 28 years experience working with children from middle school to high school. And although I had I still have a great passion for mathematics. I took my PhD in mathematics several years ago, and then I had the honor and the pride to be selected 2 years ago to be selected by Varkey Foundation and to the Global Teacher Prize. I was top 50 Global Teacher Prize finalist. And also last year, in the same team with Michael, we had the opportunity to start our collaboration with PISA. And we had a great project together to develop. And we believe that it was a powerful resource in STEAM. And together we made the STEM resource portfolio, the ideal assistant for mathematics, sciences, and engineering teachers. I think we developed a great resource in our program of designing a rich full curricula for STEM teachers.
Amazing. Thank you so much and for your introduction, as well as for the work that you did in PISA. Hopefully we can get a bit more into what you actually produced afterwards. Michael, tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Soskell. I am the 2017-18 Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year here in the United States. Early in my career, I taught 5th grade for 16 years. During that time, I was recognized by the U.S. National Science Foundation, the White House, as a presidential award for math and science winner. And I was actually recipient for mathematics. For the last 4 years, I've been teaching 4th and 5th grade science here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And during that time, I was recognized as a top 10 finalist for the Global Teacher Prize.
Very, very impressive. So I've had the pleasure of speaking with you two a bit before and falling in love with how you two teach, and also alongside being very jealous of your students. I wish I had teachers like you when I was a student. I feel like I say that in each webinar, and it's really, really true. And I hope that my teachers never actually hear me say that, because I still know many of them. I would like to begin with you, Michael, and asking a bit about how you have broken from the mold in how you teach and how you have worked to engage your students.
Yeah, so this is my 22nd year of teaching, and for the first decade or so, I was really good at being a mediocre teacher. I did everything that you would expect a teacher to do. My kids sat in rows and they were on task more than they were off task. I had great classroom management, but really terrible classroom empowerment. My kids would learn and then pass tests and quizzes, and then 3 weeks later probably forget most of the things that they learned. But that's what I knew as a teacher. That's pretty much what education was for me in school, and it got me through, and it's what I thought that I was supposed to be doing. But I happened to go to a conference, and on a whim, I ended up in a conference session that was all about building a professional learning network online using social media. And this was around 2008, give or take a couple of years. And I started connecting online with other teachers, and I loved my students, and I realized I was not doing for them what needed to be done. I was not giving them the same kind of experiences and opportunities that other teachers were giving their students. And so I was determined at that point to change and to get better. And that really started me on a trajectory with a growth mindset of constantly improving and looking for new ways to bring great experiences to my kids. And because of that, it led to a lot of first project-based learning, where my kids would, instead of learning and then doing a project, they would be given a project that they had to learn the content in order to complete the task, to complete the project. After that, it developed into problem-based learning, where there was no set solution, and they would be given some kind of problem that they had to work on and come up with a solution for it. And then eventually, over the past 5 or 6 years, my students have been identifying their own problems in the world, in their communities that they are passionate about solving, and then using the engineering process and the tools at their disposal to make a real difference in the world.
Is this connected to your hands-on global impact work?
Sure. So because we live in a very isolated area of the Poconos, my students aren't exposed to those that are different than them very often. And so we use video conferencing to bring scientists and national park rangers and classrooms from around the world into our classrooms, so that students have opportunity that they otherwise wouldn't have. And because of that, they're exposed to lots of different problems. And often they've built relationships with kids in other areas and realized that those other children had some problems, and they've decided they wanted to get involved. So for example, 3 years ago, on a call where we were playing Mystery Animal, my kids were trying to guess an animal that a group of kids in Kenya had chosen before they could guess the animal that my kids had picked. And we played this game, and it was fun. And then the school director took us around his village, and he showed us a bridge that crossed a creek. And he told us that the younger students in kindergarten, first and second grade from the other side of the village were not allowed to go to school because the bridge was too dangerous. And my students were really impacted by that. And they said right there, Mr. Soskel, we should do something about that. That's not right. And so they spent a couple of months first designing out of paper and then cardboard replacement bridges, and looking at bridge designs and using the science they were learning in their classroom to try and figure out a solution. And they tested the bridges with pennies and rocks to make them fail, and they used the design process to make them better. And eventually they drew up plans and sent them to a bridge designer in Kimilili, Kenya, who came up with actual blueprints and gave us a price. And then my students spent the year fundraising with their 5th grade teachers to be able to replace the bridge based on their design.
Wow. And how is this bridge standing now?
It's still there. Yeah, you can go, if you ever visit the village of Mukuyuni, Kenya, you can walk over it. There's a beautiful guava tree right over the bridge that you can grab a guava right off the tree and eat it.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us.
Sure.
Manuela, a question that I have for you is, we had chatted a bit about how you attract your students to your math topics in order to be able to get them to engage. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how you do that.
I use different approaches to time, because we talk about our past also. So in the past years, at the beginning, I had a great emphasis on mathematics because the kids were very interested about mathematics, and I prepared them until the International Olympiad for Mathematics. But time passed, and the interest of the students started to decrease. The advancement of technologies and the access that they have to the technology changed their perception in the classroom, and for mathematics especially, because mathematics is very formal, and they seem to not be interested. They are attracted by actions, by movement, by powerful colors, and that's why I tried to wrap up mathematics, to outfit mathematics in a more attractive way for them, to convince them that mathematics is useful. And I started step by step. It's an old idea that was developed for the PISA project last year. It involves many years behind of work developed ideas about how to connect mathematics with everything around. And that's why my first step was NASA Educational Resources. NASA has important and a huge amount of resources for implementing the classroom. But of course, you have to fit to the topic. On the other hand, I started to develop by myself resources for the classroom. By example, I had students who wants to follow medicine. I want to be a doctor. I don't need mathematics. Oh, really? So that's why I started to search, and I found some interesting topics about, by example, how to diagnose disease using the graph of functions, how to study this disease, how you made a graph, how to use statistics, and how to diagnose the students, which type the disease, which type of disease it is, or how to study the epidemic evolution of a disease using differential equations. Today, I'm in my school. There are many students interested by sports. That's why, for example, this year at Quadratis, I developed lessons about how to have the best kick in football or basketball, and to capture the interest of the students. One of my favorite activity developed, because a lot of these activities are in our PISA research portfolio. One of my latest and favorite activity, it refers at coding and decoding, because students are attracted very much about this flux of information, about how we transmit information from one corner of the world to the other. We streams, by example, images, we streams text, we code this in and transform it into numbers and to electronic signals, and then we decode. So that's why I started to use this inspiration in algebra. By example, when I have functions, I invent some beautiful activities for students, playing the role of some FBI agents, and they want to decode a message to transmit. By example, they like to use smartphones. So I open their smartphone in the classroom. Look, you are an agent and you want to transmit to your colleague a message, and you want to send a number. How you do this? Use this function, x+2, in order to transmit a message that can be easily decodified. And that's why the students were very helpful to play the role of the FBI agent and to decode that message. Then I said, I want to send him a text, but if I send him a text, I want to use numbers. So in order to use numbers, it will be very difficult for you to help the student using that numbers to find the text of characters, because at every number on your smartphone, you have 3 letters. So it's a problem also of literacy. And with these kinds of activities, I started to gain the classroom to pay attention later to my topic. And of course, after this, I will follow with the formal and abstract mathematics, but all the time I'm relating to their interests. And I think this is a huge asset to think in the classroom when you start a new topic, to come and think and design an interesting activity for the student that links with some cool and trendy subjects from from outside world.
Which is really important, and it's not picking up a textbook and reading the textbook to a class, which is kind of how things used to be, and sometimes how things are, and hopefully are transitioning out of that space. And to Michael, I'm wondering, we had chatted in the past about not teaching to the book and how useful that is in the classroom. And I asked you specifically about standardized testing and how you still have to deal with standardized testing, yet your class is full of life. And how do you do that?
Yeah, so I don't spend any time at all focused specifically on standardized testing. I mean, certainly we have a curriculum that we have to follow, and it's my job as a professional teacher to make sure that those standards are embedded into the things that we do in our classroom. But I have very much taken the approach in the latter part of my career, in the second half of my career, that I am not going to start with the content and then figure out how to teach it well. I am going to start with experiences and activities that make kids want to beat down the door of my classroom to get in here. And then once I have them that engaged, I will find ways to embed the curriculum into that. And so when kids are talking to an astronaut or a scientist with live penguins on camera, they are so excited about that activity that I can then take whatever content we need to and create an activity off of that, and they're already locked in. And we know that in American elementary schools, we reteach 60% of our content every year in our curriculum. And the reason for that is that kids don't have an emotional attachment with what they're learning. And from neuroscience, we know that if there's no emotional connection with the content, kids can learn it in their short-term memory, and they can pass a test, but within 3 weeks, it's gone. And by flipping that model and starting with amazing experiences, kids retain information longer. And what we've found is, since I took over as a science teacher here, our standardized test scores went from 69% proficient to 89, to last year we were 94.7% proficient. And it is a terrible metric to measure success, so I hate to even put it out there. But even without focusing specifically on those tests, my kids are doing fine. And the reason is because they're learning authentically.
And do you feel that that also helps you? All teachers, no matter how great a teacher is, will have to deal with disruptive students at some point. And so I like to think that your students are going to be more engaged because you are doing these amazing exercises in your class and ways of and embracing these ways of teaching. I'm wondering how you work with some of the disruptive students despite having this amazing space.
Yeah. Sure. Every teacher is going to have children that are a little bit more difficult or that have special needs or have behavior issues. But what I found is because I create a culture in my classroom where the learning belongs to the students and not to me, and there is ownership and there is a shared responsibility over learning, that kids are engaged when they're in here and those behavior problems are somewhat mitigated. I don't tend to have any real serious behavior problems in here. I can't remember the last time that I had to do anything serious discipline-wise for a student that was in my room. I mean, certainly there's small corrections that have to be made, but I think the reason is that learning in here is hands-on. It's driven by student passion. When kids tell me that they're passionate about something, we drop everything and let them do it. That bridge project that I described before, that was not something that I had planned on doing. That came at the end of the call. Students came up to me and said, "Mr. Soskell, that's not right. We should do something about that." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." And then I spent the next week panicking, figuring like, how are we going to embed the content I have to teach into this lesson, right? And that's what my planning was spent doing, is finding that connection for them. So if you start with the experience first and you really use your planning time to plan around student passion and interest, the way Manuela was talking about before, I think that behavior problems and standardized test scores tend to take care of themselves, a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree. I'm wondering, so if I was debating asking this question later, but I'll ask it now. I'm wondering, when you are encouraging your students to reach out to different students across the world and using technology, I'm wondering how you incorporate intercultural teaching into that time.
Yeah, so early when we first started doing this, I've been doing video connections since Skype became free and available, which is probably about 10 years ago. And early on, I would notice that my kids, if we spoke with a group of kids in another part of the world where to us they seemed to have an accent, that my kids would find that funny and they would laugh. And I would address it afterwards. And what I realized is that I needed to be a lot more proactive about addressing those things. And so in the beginning of the year, when we first started having these calls with students that may not have been in my classroom before, that's a discussion that we have. Look, the students that we're speaking to, English, let's say we're speaking to kids in the Kibera slum of Nairobi. Those kids speak 3 languages. English is their 3rd language. They have a tribal language. They speak Kiswahili, and they're learning English in school. So the fact that they have an accent and that they're speaking and they may misuse a word now and then, those kids, that's their 3rd language and you're speaking your 1st. So, and that allows my kids to see things in a whole different light, right? These kids are singing to us their songs in Kiswahili, and it's beautiful, and then they're singing in English, right? That blows my students' minds. And it instantly develops a kind of relationship because we addressed it ahead of time. So those are things that I try and be real proactive about.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense and is incredibly interesting, and not something that I had when I was in school or what you had in school in terms of being able to connect. And I'm going to ask you, Manuela, your first language is Romanian, I believe. How can you help teachers feel, do you have advice for teachers who might be working in their 2nd language?
How I advise teachers, would you repeat, please?
So how you work in your second language every day now, and I'm wondering if you have any advice for other teachers who might be feeling shy about speaking in their second language in front of a group of students.
Oh, I have a lot of advisors here. If you ask me, this is what you ask me, I have mentors. I have a lot of resources from the school staff that help me and monitor me and try to adapt me and to implement me in the American system. Of course, it's not very easy for me to teach, but in another language. But regarding the mathematical vocabulary and educational vocabulary, I'm okay. But outside this, I have great difficulties, especially with the accent, the slang, and that's why it's a bit difficult. But my luck is that mathematics not involves so much language outside the scientific content, and that's why I think our communication is very good. On the other hand, the school in which I am today had a lot of international students who are not mastering English very well. So that's why our communication is also very good, because usually they are from South America, they are from Spanish, they had Spanish language, and this is very similar with the Romanian language and accent also.
Okay, that's
And I think Manuela has a huge advantage that she teaches the universal language. Everybody speaks mathematics. No matter where you are, anywhere in the universe, mathematics is the same, which is why we send out the Voyager spacecraft with all kinds of mathematical content on it, right?
This is true. Mathematics wasn't the challenge here. The challenge was English and how to implement new strategies and the new classroom scenarios, and how to work with kids with don't have not in particular really passion for mathematics, because in Romania mathematics it becomes a way of living later. If you knew mathematics later, you could approach any career in Romania, almost any career. Here, indeed, it's a problem with mathematics because they have a lot of opportunities, so they are not very interested in learning mathematics so deep as they were in Romania, and that's why my creative part here, it fits very well in my opinion here. And in the same time, if you address to the students at their level of understanding and their level for mathematics, and you have a great experience, as I had with the students of any level, and you can scaffold their learning, I think although this is a good asset for United States to have me teaching.
I'm happy that you're teaching, and I'm sure your students are happy that you're teaching too, because they get to imagine that they are FBI agents solving codes. You were saying how you have international students, and in general, you're teaching a topic that is perceived as very difficult. I'm wondering how you work in your classroom with students of different levels. Not everyone who comes into a class is going to be learning at the same rate, and I'm wondering how you support your students with different learning levels.
Yes, I have different strategies for these students, different tasks, and different level of communication with them. By example, if I have a struggling solver and an advanced solver, with a struggling solver, I split the content in small chunks, and I insist very much to understand every small bit part. I use also with the struggling solvers, I use the thinking aloud strategy. So I speak to very much with them what we should think about this, what we notice. I encourage the conversation. In the same time, I encourage them to speak one with each other, because many times they have their language, their specific language that helps one another to understand better. With advanced students, I think the art of the teacher is to craft some useful questions to unlock the solutions, such that the student should be able to deliver by himself the solution. But that's why you should know how to ask. On the other hand, you should have real expectations to different students, and according to their level of proficiency in mathematics. So you raise the bar very high for the advanced learner, and for the struggling learners, you identify their gaps, you should address to their gaps in that respective moment, because otherwise this will evolve, and it will block the student later. And I think encouraging is a good strategy with all kinds of students, but especially with the struggling ones, because when they start to understand and when they start to deliver answers to you, even these answers are maybe not very advanced answers, but you should encourage them, because it's a step, it's their first time. And if you entrust them in their thinking, I think this is our powerful resource to attract them to mathematics, because they will follow then the pattern. But of course, it's very important, because in mathematics, to learn mathematics, you need not only strategies and persistence, you need also time. Time is very important, because in short time you can't register important increasing in learning. But during the time, these gaps can be covered, and that's why you asked me before about differences in our previous discussion between two systems of education. I think in Romania it was a good point that the same teacher to have the same class until, by example, in my case, I had students from their 5th grade until their 12th grade. So I can put a hallmark on the students. And after 8 years to learning mathematics with me, they start to be, that's why they were at Harvard today, or at Princeton, or in England, or everywhere. But here, I think changing the course every semester, it's not enough time to develop great results with that respective class of students. Because as we talked before, it's important students start to like the teachers first, and then they start the content. And any relationship requires time. So a good relationship requires time, and a good teaching also requires time.
That's really interesting. There are a few private schools that I know of back where I am from that you would be with your teacher from kindergarten until you graduate either your first set of schooling, your elementary schooling, or your high school. I'm wondering, Michael, what your thought is on that. How do you feel about what's your thought?
So I mean, right now I teach 4th and 5th grade science, but for a couple of years I had 3rd graders also. And so my current 5th graders I've actually had for 3 years in a row. Okay. And I can say there is huge benefit to that. There have been amazing gains that I've seen in them since they were 3rd graders, just because they've been doing, when kids come in my classroom, I tell them, you're not here to learn science, you're here to be scientists. And now they've been scientists for 3 years and had to do everything that scientists do, like for everything from design experiments to publish their results. And so that's become, like I said, just the culture in my classroom. And that makes it easier. By the time when they walk in as 5th graders, they know exactly what's expected. So I've seen great results there. One of the things I want to answer the question you asked before also about how I differentiate for different learning abilities in my classroom. One of the things that I found was incredibly effective was to get away from tests and quizzes and to use shorter formative assessments to drive my teaching. So very often at the end of lessons, after 1 or 2 class periods or after an experiment, I will give kids just an index card and I will ask them 1 or 2 questions that are at the heart of what I was trying to teach. And based on their answers, I'll find more time to help the ones that need a little more time to catch up. And that prevents anyone from falling too far behind. I have a rule in my class that nobody gets lower than an 80 on any test or quiz. You either get a 80 or above, or you get the word retest on top of it. And that just tells me that you haven't learned it yet. And I'm going to find some time to reteach it to you until you get it. So that takes all of the pressure of grades off of my students. They know that the learning is more important than the actual grade. And we can just focus on getting the science done.
Okay. That is so great. Both of you are fantastic. Do you have any, just while we're talking about kind of what you do in your class, do you have any tips on lesson plan writing?
Yeah, so I can take that one first. I found early on in my career that what the plans that I normally wrote ended up getting destroyed about 5 minutes into the lesson anyway. So teaching is so much more of an art than it is a science, and getting a feel for your students. So I tend to, when I lesson plan, I tend to do it in generalities. I know the topic that I want to teach. I know the activity, especially if there's an experiment we're doing or something the kids are really passionate about. I'll make sure that the materials are there. I have whole closets full of weird things like, hoses and string and everything you would need to engineer stuff, whether we're building a kite or building hydroponics units out of spackle buckets. So making sure that the materials are there is important. But other than that, I really, like I said, in my classroom, students drive the learning. And so there's not a whole lot of set direction from me. There's guiding questions, there's big ideas, there's questions that students have come up with that we're trying to attack. So I know my content well enough that if I start with a topic and an activity, I can build the rest of the lesson around that on the fly and be adaptable. If it's not going well, I can change it. Or if it's going really well, we can add on to it. And then that changes my plans for the next period anyway.
Okay. That is fantastic. And what about you, Manuela? Any tips on lesson planning?
Yes, and I will speak about lesson planning from the United States because this is more interesting. In Romania, it's a very incipient phase, this lesson planning. They are on the same task for many dozens of years. But in the United States, I learn a lot of things and I try to figure out my own way of learning. So I pay attention to some specific strategies. So first, to have a warm-up activity, but not very difficult to discourage the students. Then a short phase of investigation. I use a bit guided investigation if it is difficult. Then after investigation, I have, as Michael said, the focus instruction, which is 5 or 10 minutes because students should have the content. Here we don't use textbooks, and that's why I should have the content very clear, and I try to deliver them also what examples to study or to present. So I embed a bit a direct instruction when it is needed and when it is required by specific skills. And although the assignment, I pay attention to the assignment to be relevant because very important what assignment do you choose, what relevant are, how much relevance have the tasks. Of course, in the focus instruction, I try to use many visuals because visuals and examples from real life, as I told you before, on activities are very important. Them to remind, as we learned in our recent course of neuroscience, as Michael said before, that visuals, retrieval, and although I use spiralizing strategy of the content. So time to time, I'm going deeper in mathematics with small steps in order to not forget. And although I pay attention at the beginning of the classroom to have the objectives on the smart board, to pay attention what abilities should they have, I'm trying to pay attention also at the social goal. If I can embed a social goal, some way of activity in which they collaborate, this will be wonderful in the math classroom, because it's truly difficult to embed in the math classroom all the time such an activity. And that's why I'm trying, and although I put them written instructions for them, especially because I have international students in order to understand. And I use feedback also, exit ticket, entry ticket, depends on the content. And as Michael said before, it's very important this also for solving for struggling solvers or for advanced solvers, but especially for struggling solvers, to give them the chance to improve their way, to reteach the subject. To forget the content, it is normal. Everyone forgets, but it's important in that moment to come again and reteach it and give him another chance to have the pleasure to stay in your classroom and to follow you, not only after the threat of the grades.
Thank you so much. And I have a quick question for you. What kind of warm-up activities do you do at the beginning of your lessons?
I'm trying, if I can, to start to figure out the new content. If I can embed a short activity that involves necessary many skills in mathematics, but also to help me to figure out the new content, it will be wonderful. If I want to have to get in front some prior knowledge, some retrieval, also I use not a very difficult activity. I'm interested that they should remember a bit about that content, because otherwise, anyway, I'm prepared to reteach the new content if needed. But that's why my warm-up activity, it will be about 10 minutes, not more. But I try to attract them.
Can you give me an example of your favorite warm-up activity?
My favorite warm-up depends on the subjects. I give you an example, by example, for function. If I'm going to, by example, we use very much here technology. It's soft in mathematics. And by example, I give them the task if I want to solve equation. By example, I had equation. And I give them the task to use that solve to find the solution of an equation, which is very creative. It's not very difficult. They should think that they have two functions that must be equal, so they can go on that solve to graph the function and figure out the common point of the solution. So it's one task, but not very difficult and not very much skills at the beginning of the lesson to figure out the new lesson, if I can do it, or can be also an assignment of our activity of yesterday. Depends on the case.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jen, I'm gonna jump in and I'm gonna share, since I used to teach math as a 5th grade teacher. One of my favorite math warm-up activities would be to throw out a random number at students. So in 5th grade, say take the number 2.5, and I would tell them, all right, for the next 4 minutes, write down all of the ways that you can create an equation that ends up with 2.5, right? So it could be 2.5 times 1. It could be 1 plus 1.5. It can be whatever, just to get their brain started and start thinking about fractions before we dive into maybe, adding fractions with unlike denominators or something. But just as a quick warm-up activity, just to get their brain going. And for me to be able to, like Manuela said, walk around and assess some of the things that they're doing.
Okay. That is good. I love warm-up activities. I think that they're super important in everything that you do, from math to facilitating to hanging out with friends for the first time in a while. Warm-up activities and just icebreaker stuff is really good, really healthy. A question that I have, kind of veering into a more digital focus, is, I'll direct it to you, Michael, if that's okay. Encouraging your students to think more critically about the digital world. That's not necessarily totally science focused or math focused, but.
Sure. I think there's a lot of times that schools ban technology, especially social media and other newer technologies, because they're afraid of the implications of what might happen with students. I have a friend, Kevin Honeycutt, out in Kansas, who uses the term that often we send kids out on the digital playground with no recess monitor, and bad things happen, which is predictable. I think that we have a responsibility in schools to make sure that we teach students how technology can be used for good. You look at what we're doing right now, right? The three of us are having this amazing conversation about STEM teaching, and there are teachers all over the world learning from it. Why can't our students have these kinds of opportunities also? Why can't they realize the power in connecting teachers from Romania and the United States to help other teachers learn STEM activities, right? Like these are things that happen in the world outside of school, but they don't happen enough inside of school. And when we look at how we use technology in my classroom, we very much focus on what is the learning that needs to happen, what is the most incredible experience that we can create around that learning, and what's the technology we need to make that happen. It doesn't start with the tool, it starts with the experience. And through that, I think my students are starting to learn the power of using technology well. I really believe, and in the book that I wrote with 5 other Global Teacher Prize finalists that came out in March, Teaching in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, we look at ways that we can keep schools technologically relevant, because when kids come to school, we want to make sure that it looks like what's going to happen in the workforce afterwards, but also keep school and teaching rooted in the things that are truly important: humanity, empathy, and compassion, and finding the sweet spot between those two different avenues to make sure that kids are really looking at how they can innovate and at the same time make the world a better place.
Do you feel like what you are doing is affecting your students in a global sense?
I hope so. I mean, here we are in this tiny town population of 2,000, give or take, that is almost entirely people who look the same, and yet they are able to have these incredible experiences and develop friendships with people in different continents, and learn about different holidays that are totally different than what we celebrate here, and different cultures, and them having those experiences and doing it through technology, I think gives them a window into how we can build bridges. And the world is so complex and polarized right now. There needs to be nuanced conversation. And the only way to do that is to really see people and develop a shared humanity with those that are different than us. And so I hope that I'm giving my students the opportunity to do that using technology, and that shows them the power of technology in their own lives as they go forward.
What types of technology do you use most often in your classroom?
Video conferencing is the most powerful tool we have, because it opens up windows into other areas. I mean, certainly, there are times where my kids have a presentation to build and they use something cool like PowerPoint or Haiku Deck or something else that we have. There's a ton of different apps out there. We haven't used Haiku Deck in a couple of years. Virtual reality software if they want to go on a tour of a museum. There's all of those kinds of things, but they're not. They are not the primary resource in here. They are just a tool to give kids experiences that they otherwise wouldn't have. Mm-hmm.
And Manuela, I'm wondering what types of technology you use in your classroom for teaching math.
Yes, I'm using almost everyday technology, because as I took the feedback from the students, I noticed that they like very much and they work better on technology when they work on technology than when they work on worksheets. And that's why I'm trying to embed very often technology, and it's a very cool thing, because they have there are some software that are for free for every teacher around the world, and they are provided by United States. It's about Kahoot. Kahoot is a very good platform with a lot of tests and a lot of revisions or focus instruction. Also, quizzes is very rich in this part. IXL, it's very good for specific topics. And a new resource that I discovered this summer is also from the United States, and it's for free. for teachers and students is CK12. They have a large area of of resources, starting from flex books. You can build your own book using technology. You can have a classroom also in this platform. They have also very interesting summaries. They have, but what is most interesting, they have simulations in mathematics, in science, which are very attractive for students. And I like very much that content clicks: play, learn, interaction, and then explore. So this CK12 is very, very modern, and I like it very much. The others one are tailored on the curriculum, but it's a good thing because they can play games live or individual in the classroom, and they like very much. Are very thrilled when they work on the smartboard. What happened with their score? How they raise or how they decrease, or which was a good answer. And I think the technology it's a good thing for kids because they really have digital abilities, but especially in games. But step by step, using technology, they start to have ability in using internet, as Michael said, in the good sense.
Yeah. So Jennifer, I want to add one more thing to that answer and kind of tie things together a little bit. The last two questions you asked were about planning and then about technology. And I have to say that for me, as my classroom has become more and more student-centered, more and more of my planning time has been spent on creating, using technology to find experiences for kids. And more of my classroom time has become kids doing really amazing things and me walking around wondering what I should be doing because they're just rocking it in my room, right? You know, that's when you know you've got a good lesson going on. But a couple of resources that are really amazing for teachers to find those video conferencing opportunities. One of them is the Skype in the Classroom website, which is education.microsoft.com. And then you click on the Skype in the Classroom link. And what that does is that you know, Microsoft goes out and finds really amazing people that are willing to talk to your kids for free. And so we find so many national park rangers and scientists and authors and just these amazing coders and computer programmers that are willing to talk to our students, and we can schedule virtual field trips through there. The other one for elementary teachers, which I've latched onto this year and has been amazing, is a new tool, and it's, as Manuela said, it's free, which as teachers is the only thing we can afford in our favorite price, is Empatico. So empatico.org is a website where you put in the times that you're available. There are 9 different lessons that you can choose that are attached to your curriculum, and it will automatically connect you with another class more than 300 miles away that is available at the same times and willing to do the same lesson with you. And it allows you to develop this amazing relationship with kids in a different location. And the entire purpose for that platform is to develop empathy in students by meeting kids that are different than them, which speaks to my soul. Like, that's why I do what I do as a teacher. So that's one of my new favorite tools for doing this kind of work.
That's amazing. My mind is constantly blown when I'm speaking with teachers who are embracing these different methods and opportunities in teaching because of the immense intercultural competencies that can be developed in kids and youth. I think it's absolutely amazing. So do you think has the technology helped you be more effective in the classroom, or how would you rate yourself in that? Yeah, I don't think I would be the teacher that I am right now if it wasn't for advancements in technology. And the reason for that is it has broken down the walls of isolation in my school and in my community, and has allowed me to connect with teachers like Manuela and so many other teachers around the world, for me to gather inspiration and ideas from them and bring it back to my own students. And that's a double-edged sword, right? The more amazing teachers that you're around, the more you constantly feel inferior. But at the same time, the more you're inspired. So, right, that's a balancing act that happens when you first start connecting. But the incredible network of thousands of teachers from around the world who are just doing these
these incredible things that I can then take the best parts of that, or the things that that relate to my students best, and adapt them and make them happen in my own classroom, and then share them again and get feedback on them so they can keep getting better. That is the epitome of the growth mindset we're trying to develop in our students. We want our kids to be lifelong learners and global citizens, and the best way to model that for them is to be it ourselves. And that gives me the opportunity to do that and to create great educational experiences for kids using those skills on myself.
Amazing. Amazing. And so both of you have talked about these resources that you have been finding. And Manuela, I'm wondering what where do you find them? How do you stay on top of where things that can help you are?
I'm passionate about education. I read very much. I watch as much as I can, and I learn as much as I can from studies, from Edutopia, from PISA for You, from whatever is related to education. So step by step, I started to find out about these resources. In the same time, if you are interested, internet outside and Google is full of resources for teachers. A simple searching for, by example, search NASA educational activities, and you will have for mathematics or for science or whatever, you will find a lot of resources. Search, by example, CK12, and you'll find a huge universe of resources. Although I was very interested about the resources that you can embed and they are related to the curriculum, and that's why I spoke about quizzes, about Kahoot, about IXL, because they are for free. And as Michael said before, when I was in Romania, I used very much Skype in the classroom, and I connected. I was principal in that time, and I could have the power to deliver the best strategies. And it was very important to connect kids around the world. They can change and build a correct mentality for a future global citizens. By example, I remember about their attitude about refugees, because in that time refugees started to come into Europe, and they almost in the mindset they were rejected. But after they talked with their colleagues from United States, and they started to laugh a bit, what about refugees? But we have here a lot of refugees. We are a big nation, and we have also diversity, and they started to figure out and to think differently. So it's very important to connect the students and to connect also teachers to deliver and to change the best instructional practices. Because as Michael said, also we can inspire one by each other, we can learn from one from each other. Because teaching and learning and teaching also for teachers is a continuous process of development. If you are not open mind to change and to realize that education today must come and must be tailored for the needs of the students, then very soon we will lose the interest for the education of the students, because we live in different universes. Most of the teachers are live like 20 years ago, and the students live in the future in the virtual universe, and that's why it's very important. Also, also in the school we use Canvas, also we use Google Classroom for our formal activities. There are a lot of resources on the internet. What is important, they require time from the teachers, because you should learn first in order to learn others. You should be one, you should learn.
Mm-hmm. That is spot on. And I was thinking, as you were saying, how the students are having an opportunity to be connecting with teachers from across the world. The teachers are also having the opportunity to meet these teachers from across the world and connect with a human who has a similar job. And I've spoken with many teachers, and it seems like for the most part, wherever you are across the world, the struggles are very much the same. How do you keep your students engaged? Create dynamic lesson plans, issues with resources. How do you keep up to date with different things? The issues are kind of the same. The spectrum just might be a bit different. Michael, I'm wondering if you can give me an idea about how we can support teachers to take these first steps into creating more dynamic classrooms.
I think it starts with flattening the hierarchy in education. Our educational systems tend to be very coercive and structured in a way where the national government tells the regional or state governments what to do. Those state governments tell schools what to do. Administrators tell teachers what to do. And then if you go into the average classroom, teachers are telling kids what to do. And that kind of coercive, right? I mean, that kind of coercive system doesn't lead to empowerment, and it doesn't lead to students taking ownership over learning or teachers taking ownership over teaching. And that's why we see so many schools demanding that teachers use scripted textbook programs. And that's awful, right? There's no creativity in that. There is no excellent teaching that's going to come from a textbook. And so what we need to do is start at the bottom, and it starts with us as teachers saying to our students, what do you need to be successful, and how can I give it to you? And then once we do that in our own classrooms, we can turn to our administrators and demand the same thing, for them to ask us, what do you need to be a successful teacher, and how can I give it to you? And if we start flipping the system in order to make that happen, so that instead of a system of coercion, we have a system of inspiration, where each level is trying to inspire the one below them, and we see each other as partners rather than in some kind of hierarchical structure, I really believe that's how we start getting the outcomes that we're looking for in education.
So what is inspiring you?
Like I said before, the other teachers that I'm constantly in contact with, whether it's teachers in my own school here in the Wampaupack South Elementary, or, I just got back from the state conference where we named our 2019-2020 State Teacher of the Year. She is absolutely incredible. Being around teachers who are inspired and love coming to work every day, passion is contagious. And so if you surround yourself with those people, Jennifer Gonzalez, who writes the Cult of Pedagogy blog.
I love this stuff.
Right? Isn't it amazing, right? Like, and her most famous post is so spot on. It's about finding your marigold. And what she describes is that if you're a gardener, you plant marigolds next to your tomato plants because they keep the pests away. But you never plant tomato plants underneath walnut trees because they make the soil toxic. And so each of us as a teacher needs to find our marigolds, find the people who make the soil fertile for us and make the environment great so that we can thrive. And we need to avoid the walnut trees who are going to make things toxic for us. And for me, that has happened not only by finding those marigolds in my own school, but by seeking them out online, so that I have this amazing network that is constantly surrounding me of people like Manuela who just make me not be able to wait to get to school the next day to deliver the next awesome experience to my students.
That is incredibly inspiring, and I really want to read that article by Jennifer Gonzalez. Her writing is fantastic. And Manuela, I'm going to ask you the same question. What is keeping you inspired to keep being the stellar, amazing teacher that you have been?
Yes, I think the first question and the reality is that I started to open my mind from the international connection, from the global connection. I started to open my mind, and that's why you notice before that are many teachers from Romania. This is a sign not too necessary for me, but especially for the fact that they don't have a source and they don't have the management of the professional development very well developed in Romania. And that's why, if you notice, last year Romania had the greater number, the biggest numbers of teachers that participated in the for you, the online program for school development, and this was the reason. And that's why there is a huge need to connect teachers from around the world and to learn from each other and to choose from best practices that are successful around the world, because we should have and we should implement and we should be creative in order to bring the education in the 21st century, because we cannot build skills of 21st centuries if we use the strategy of the last century. This is clear. And that's why we need to prepare teachers, we need to empower teachers, and we need to allow teachers to empower one from the other, because many times being in the classroom is very important to develop strategies and to have the experience and the expertise to deliver what works better. On the other hand, we have a lot of specialists that they weren't in the classroom since many years, but they speak as though conceptual. It is important also to research too, but also it's important to connect to people that works with kids. And this is an amazing group. We have also an amazing group. We are connected on Twitter, on Facebook also, on the special group, Varki Teacher Ambassadors, PISA for You, Professional Online Development. And it's very important. Microsoft also enthusiasts, and it's very important to be connected one with each other, because everyone bring in front an idea, and it's enough to help you to tackle your mind and to become more creative.
Well, thank you both so much for being those teachers who come forward and share your ideas, and hopefully are the ones who are inspiring the other teachers who are listening and those who will be listening in the future. I definitely have taken some inspiration with me. Something that's really sticking with me in terms of, it's the relationships that you two are developing with your students. Those are incredibly, incredibly important. And Michael had sent something the other day when we chatted about keeping education rooted in empathy. And that is so spot on and incredibly beautiful. I want to thank you again. I'm probably going to thank you another 5 times, but thank you so much for chatting with us. I hope that we can do another one of these very soon. And to everyone who is listening, Michael has started a podcast recently that you should definitely listen to it. Definitely give a listen. Sabina and I will be sending out some information about the resources that we talked about today, as well as how you can reach Manuela and Michael. And that's it from my end. Thank you so much. Do you two have any last words that you would like to share?
Just thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been an amazing discussion, and I hope that those who are listening will reach out and contact us, because I would love to grow my network and have more inspiring teachers in it to help me see even more things that I could do for my kids.
All the ideas.
Keep them coming.
Yes. Manuela, anything from you?
Also, I want to thank you for this great idea, and I think that this year you started with this amazing pattern of developing webinars for teachers, and I want to wish you more success in your future endeavors, and to organize more webinars, because I believe there is a huge need of bringing best practices in front of the teachers.
We agree. So thank you for that. We will speak soon. And to everyone who's out there, thank you so much and have a great evening. Bye.